Hello, everyone. Hello, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. And we are so happy that you're able to join us. We do have another guest. So if he pop on, we will be bringing him on. That is Reverend Dave Swanson. And he is with the Pittsburgh Interfaith Impact Network. But for now, we're going to introduce our guest, my friend, Chris. And Chris, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Terry, nice to see you here virtually. Thanks for having me on. I'm the Democratic nominee for Congress in the 17th Congressional District, all of Beaver County, big chunk Allegheny County around the city of Pittsburgh in nearly every direction. I'll tell you a little about me for the folks who are watching. I grew up west of Pittsburgh in Thornburg, a little borough over by Crafton, Ingram, Carnegie, that neck of the woods. Went off to the Naval Academy after high school, served as an officer at sea and a tour in Iraq on the ground, and became a lawyer in my post-military life. Was working at Pitt and was a proud member of our organizing committee alongside the steelworkers, fighting for a union, and proud to be fighting to hold this congressional seat that I think matters so much to everybody here in Western Pennsylvania. Delighted to be with you, Terry, so thank you.
No, thank you so much, and also thank you so much for your service from all of us.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. And so you tapped in a little bit on it when you decided to run for Congress. You know, what made you want to run for Congress? What concerned you? What was some issues that concerned you that said, you know what, you're going to put yourself on the front line and run for this seat?
Look, for me, it starts with public service. And that is the reason I think anyone who's in the right place that steps in to run ought to be doing it. That's my background, whether it was in uniform, serving at sea, or even Iraq, fighting for our democracy and our elections and our voting rights as a lawyer, fighting for a union at Pitt. That's what drives me. That's why I'm asking folks for their votes. And I talk a lot about fighting for our common good, whether that's strong union jobs, fighting for our manufacturing and bringing our supply chains back, to bring costs down, fighting for our democracy, for our voting rights, fighting for our freedom, people's freedom to make choices about their health care, their reproductive freedom, you name it. I think it's all on the ballot and all pretty central to who we are and who I am as a candidate in this race and who Western Pennsylvania is.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that because you said it best. It is so much on the ballot, and it's so much on the line right now. So many people's lives that are ready to be affected by the state of our country, and so thank you so much for that. And I wanted you to tap into, for the people who don't know about the Citizens United. I have read that you were making sure to fight for Citizens United against. So tell us exactly what that is for anyone who does not know.
Well, it's a Supreme Court decision some years ago, and the Supreme Court, basically said that spending money in elections equals speech. And what it means practically is that huge corporations can dump unlimited money to influence our elections. And they do it, and you'll see it in my race and many others through super PACs, what they're called. And it has limited what the Congress can do to regulate this obscene and frankly corrupting money in our politics and our elections. I think most people, doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, they see this stuff. They know it's crooked to have millions and frankly billions of election cycles pouring in to protect and serve the interests of the most massive and powerful corporations in this country. And look, we got to have, for a democracy that's healthy, you got to have people's voices matter more than the money. That's something I believe. I don't think it's a partisan issue, frankly. Wherever the Republican politicians may be, I think the people around here understand it's a problem and that we need some real reform so that our voices aren't drowned out by huge buckets upon buckets upon buckets of dollars. And that's the reality of our elections now.
Yeah, because it's if someone is spending millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars on a campaign, they're going to want some type of favors in on the other side of that. So and that is not a democracy. That is not how we should be living or fearing for our elections. And so with that, Chris, I want to go into my next question, or my next you know, I want to go to my next question and give me your idea, suggestion, or opinion about what exactly can be done to protect our to make sure that our elections are fair and safe. Because as we've seen, what led up to January 6th, what can be done to not have that happen to us again?
Look, there's no simple solution, right? I think what we saw on January 6th with the insurrection, people storming, attacking the Capitol, there's no single law that's going to stop people who are dedicated to trying to overthrow the democracy. I think there are some things we can do to strengthen our democracy and protect people's freedom and the right to vote. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is a really important part of that. Until the Supreme Court almost a decade ago struck down part of the Voting Rights Act, we had strong protections federally when there were laws that were trying to suppress the vote, whether in counties or states. And the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act would restore some of those protections at the federal level, and is written in a way that should pass this Supreme Court's muster, I would hope. There are other things we
Hmm.
got to do. There are some technical fixes, even to fix a law called the Electoral Count Act, which is this law that's pretty old that governs how we count the electoral college votes. And if you remember from Jan 6, I mean, that's what was happening in the Congress that day. They were doing this basic thing of counting electoral college votes. And the former president and some of his supporters that day sought to disrupt and overthrow that vote. And so we need I think, some fixes to make sure that our laws are ready if it's stressed again. And I think, you got into money in politics,
Hmm.
whether it's how campaign finance is done, how we draw our maps to have competitive races. Look, I'm in a district that's actually competitive. That's rare. Most congressional seats in this country are not competitive. They're drawn for incumbents to be pretty safe. And I think oftentimes that means politicians don't have to work for votes. They don't have to convince people the
Hmm.
reason to show up
Hmm.
and support them. And I think it comes into some of the weaknesses we're seeing in our democracy. So there's no one small thing I can point to. It's a broad way that we've got to be committed to this thing. And I think it turns on the people, it turns on the norms, and it turns on the laws. And we've got to have strength in all of those to keep this experiment of ours going.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, you said a mouthful there, Chris, because there is no one, and I asked you that question because even me, sometimes I do the same thing. I want something fixed right now. Why isn't this one particular person doing it? You know what I'm saying? And it just doesn't work like that. So I'm glad that you explained that this is a process, and it takes all of us. It takes everyone, to make sure that everybody is on board. And I'm glad you brought up the John Lewis Voting Act as well, to make sure that we protect our votes in in a safe way. And so going to
Can I
that,
add something, Terry, to that
please,
about that
yes,
law too?
absolutely. Hmm.
Yeah, and I should say, before the Supreme Court struck down the Voting Rights Act,
Hmm.
this law used to pass and be renewed for decades with bipartisan support, big bipartisan majorities in Washington. This didn't used to be a partisan fight to say we would protect voting rights federally.
Hmm.
It's become that, frankly, because the Republicans have walked away from it. But it
Hmm.
didn't used to be, and it's frankly sad that that's where we are. I think most Americans don't view protecting voting rights as a partisan problem. Some politicians on the right seem to, and that's a shame because I think we do a disservice to people when some on the right have made these into partisan issues and they shouldn't be.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for adding that. Because it is sad. But like you said, it's not one fix. It's going to take many of us and your team, and making sure that things get to where we want them to go. It's going to take more than just a one answer, or a one-time fix. So thank you for adding that, Chris. Um, my next question, or I want to, ask you, Chris, with you being a veteran and everything, um, a lot of times I can hear or how our vets are treated, and especially when we just ended a war. Some of our men and women came home. What do you think that everything is okay with what they're receiving as housing, medical, money? Um, do you think everything is okay for them? And if so, tell us why. And if not, tell us why.
Well, I don't think everything's okay. I'll give you an example of why I say that. Too many of my fellow veterans uh, are struggling to get the help that they need, that they've earned. People who stepped up to serve this country in a time of war. Just this past summer, last few months, Senator Pat Toomey and many others who voted to send my friends and me to fight a war in Iraq, to serve in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
He and others were voting down and holding up a bill to provide basic health benefits for those of us who were exposed to burn pits. People who try to wrap themselves in the flag and call themselves patriots were blocking
Yeah.
health care for the veterans they sent off to fight. So no, I don't think everything is right. I think that we still have too much cynicism, frankly, right wing politicians who love to use patriotism when it's time for votes and somehow lose that sense
Mm-hmm.
when it's time to take care of the people they send to go fight. So I don't think everything's okay. I think too many veterans are still having to fight for the health care they've earned, that they deserve.
Yeah.
That it's a sacred bond in this country. When you ask someone to go serve and risk their lives, you take care of them when it's time to deal with the wounds that they bear, invisible or visible, it doesn't matter. And so, look, one of the things I'm very committed to, and I don't think it's a partisan issue, is I'll never break that bond, my fellow veterans. Our VA ought to be fully staffed and funded.
Yeah.
Veterans, no matter where you live, whether you're near a big city or in rural parts of the country, you can get the care you need, and that it's there and it's ready for you. And I think that's something that Congress hasn't done a good enough job of doing.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Because, like I said, I know I hear it. I'm sure some of our listeners hear it, and if not, even going through it themselves with family members or themselves. So, thank you so much for that. I also, and I'm not gonna hold you long. I'm not gonna hold you long, but I do want to ask you a couple more questions. And one of them is, I know when you had visit us the last time, we had talked about. Women's rights, or the woman's right to choose, and we also talked about what can be done with this uprise and uptick in racism in our country, and what part does Congress play in or either or both of those situations, tragedies actually.
Yeah. And look, I think the many ways whether it's racism or so many other of the isms, right, that are designed to
Yeah.
divide us all, put us against each other, it's not going away. And frankly, I
Hmm.
think the forces that are trying to divide us are the same forces that are spending all this money in our elections, that are trying to subvert our politics to protect the biggest and most powerful companies in this country, who are gouging us in a lot of ways. It doesn't surprise me. I think the answer is solidarity. The answer is
Hmm.
solidarity on a lot of ways. And you ask about reproductive freedom and abortion rights. Yes, the
Hmm.
Congress can take action, and it should. There's a bill, Women's Health Protection Act, that would
Hmm.
codify Roe v. Wade, which means put in federal law what the Supreme Court's opinion in Roe v. Wade used to mean. The House of Representatives has passed it, the Senate has not. What that means is the next Congress, should I be a Western Pennsylvania's congressman, will have a vote on this. I'll support it. And there's a clear contrast in my race. My opponent absolutely will not. He's a guy who has called for abortion bans across the country, for even making victims of rape or incest have
Hmm.
to give birth. It's extreme. It's dangerous. I think it's a threat to our freedom, and the contrast couldn't be clearer in my race on that.
Yeah, I actually there was a young lady I read that she was not for women's right to choose, and she got pregnant, and she had to leave her state and she wanted abortion, and that was something that her and her family and her doctor chose to do, but she had to leave her state to do it. And so now she's on the front line for a woman's right to choose. But it shouldn't we shouldn't have to go to those tragedies. But I just was reading that like day before yesterday. So like you said, it's a lot to be done, Chris,
Yeah.
and uniting
We're going to
together
hear
to
more of
make.
these stories, Terry.
No,
Is it going
go
to
ahead,
continue to
please.
happen? No, we're going to hear more of these stories of people in crisis who are, because of these laws in states, laws that if Doug Mastriano becomes the governor,
Hmm.
we'll have here in Pennsylvania, I'm sure, that
Yeah.
will threaten prison time for physicians, for treating healthcare, for providing
Hmm.
reproductive healthcare to people,
Hmm.
for letting people and their doctors decide what's best rather than right wing politicians threatening jail time for people. So I come back to this issue and this fight around abortion rights and reproductive freedom. It's about exactly that. It's about freedom. And
Yeah.
I think the extremism we're seeing from the right wing is dangerous and plain for all to see right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for that. And I'm hoping our listeners are listening and or Google anything that myself or you are saying, or if they if anybody that is listening and want to ask Chris any questions that we may not be discussing, or want to even go further into some of the things that we are discussing, please reach out. His information is on the ticker. Please write it down and reach out. My next question to you is, I have two more. The number one is that when you decided, this is like a family, when you decided to run for Congress, Chris, was this something hard for your family to accept? That's one. And then two is, did I see you holding a brand new baby? Did you just have a baby?
My
Did
youngest
you?
is a little older than a year, so not too old just yet. Yeah,
Okay,
look,
okay,
listen, it's a certainly anyone who runs, I'm sure would tell you it's tough on the family, but it's I think that's a burden worth carrying to try to serve, to try
yeah,
to represent folks and do the job well. And I certainly come from a background of public service and taken on the burden of
yeah,
deploying and doing things for this country, and so it's not something I took lightly to ask folks to vote for me to run, but I think it's worth doing, and I think this region and the people around here in this country is something worth fighting for.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for that. And then, so my next question to you is, um, so if someone was to say, what is it that, why should I vote for Chris? Why you, Chris? Why you for Congress?
Look, I'm ready to do this job. I love this place we call home. I love this country. My life has been about public service, whether it was in uniform, fighting for our democracy as a lawyer, or standing up for a union. And what we have in this race and lots of races are pretty clear choices. I'm up against a corporate executive from a huge company that has been building infrastructure in China, who's put millions of dollars of his own money in this race, and frankly is going to go do the bidding of the huge corporations who are ripping us all off, who wants to attack our freedom and reproductive freedom of people all over this region. So I'm ready to do this job. I'm ready to do this job for all of us and fight for a government that serves all of us, not just these huge corporations that are frankly ripping people off right now.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that. And so, Chris, before we wrap it up, I want to ask: is these the way that's on the ticker? Is how that someone, if they wanted to volunteer for you, if they wanted to even donate to your campaign, or even like I said before, ask you questions that maybe I did not ask, and or even go further into the things that we did talk about. Are these the correct ways to get in touch with you? And if not, are there other ways to get in touch with you or your campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. And you see the website there, chris4pa.com, and any of our social media. We monitor all of it. Please feel free if you want to take a look, support us, reach out to the campaign and me. We'd welcome that. This is a people powered campaign, and that's the important word there, being people. So absolutely, please get in touch with the campaign, and your support means a lot. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to ask you, you have a question. You have someone said voices matter more than money, and it is beyond partisanship. Thank you for that, Ronnie. There's also a question: what are your priorities when it comes to the prison system, the carceral system? Do you see mass incarceration as a problem that Congress can tackle? And if so, how?
Yes and no. I think frankly the federal prison population is much smaller than what we see in the states, and so the Congress, of course, controls the federal criminal code and can have some rational things to do there.
Mhm,
But a lot of the fight is in the states,
mhm,
where really everyday decisions about what's criminal, what's not, what sentencing guidelines are. It's in the states. It's in Harrisburg here for us in Pennsylvania. So it's yes and no is the short answer, I think.
mhm. Thank you for that, because hopefully that you know our listeners, again, this is a community educational civic series, because that is something that a lot of people just don't know. Like they look for Congress to change the state laws or our state prisons, and it is not in that seat there. So thank you so much for that, Chris. Do that is the only question. If anyone else has any questions for Chris, please reach out. And yes, please reach out. Look at the bottom for his ticker, on the ticker for his contact information. I'm so sorry that we could not get our other guest up, Dave Swanson, from the Mennonite Church. He is also with PIIN, Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network, which West End Power, we are collaborating with to bring everyone these community educational civic series. We have several more coming up. We have Robert Ziegler coming up at the end of the month. He's running over in 17 for state rep. And so, yes, so please, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And I know we were short, but we have to let Chris get back to, running his campaign. Please look us up: YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. All of his information is on the ticker. Please write it down. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Goodbye.